Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let us begin our program, An American Jewish Visionary, the life and career of Rabbi Alexander M. Schindler. Good afternoon. My name is Dana Herman. I have the honor of serving as the Associate Director here at the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives, one of the premier national Jewish archives in the country. This afternoon's program, co-sponsored by the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanities Center, marks the beginning of an exciting few days here in Cincinnati, as tomorrow Hebrew Union College is holding graduation exercises for its master's and doctoral students in its historic Scheuer Chapel, and Saturday our rabbinical students will be ordained downtown at Plum Street Temple. Special guests have traveled far and wide to be here, so let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of Hebrew Union College President Dr. Andrew Rayfeld and his wife Dr. Miggy Greenberg, Vice President for Institutional Advancement and Chief Philanthropy Officer Melissa Greenberg, Vice President for Academic Resources Dr. Joshua Holo, and our soon-to-be new Provost Dr. Judah Cohen. A special welcome to Dr. Ed Septimus and our members of our Central Region Board of Advisors who have been our longtime friends and supporters. It's always nice to see you back here in Cincinnati. Thank you for coming. With this program, the AJA is proud to be formally launching the Rabbi Alexander M. Schindler digital collection that can be found at schindler.americanjewisharchives.org, an online archive of Rabbi Schindler's correspondence, speeches, and sermons that span the decades from his time as a newly minted rabbi to the final years of his professional career. As many of you know, this launch coincides with the recent publication of a new biography of Rabbi Schindler, authored by distinguished Professor Emeritus and longtime Cincinnatian, Dr. Michael A. Meyer, who is here with us today. Dr. Meyer has a copy of the book. Can we? Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to grab mine. The book's title is Above All, We Are Jews, a biography of Rabbi Alexander Schindler, and CCR Press, which published the book, has kindly provided the QR code on the screen that will come up on the screen so that those in the audience can easily purchase the book. We do have a few hard copies available here in Cincinnati for purchase as well. Dr. Meyer made extensive use of our Schindler collection in the writing of this book, and we're thrilled that we can now make these primary sources available to the world with the click of a button. Michael, mazal tov on the publication, which has been receiving fabulous reviews, and thank you for joining us. We can't wait to help you with your next book project. When it comes to digitization, this is not our first rodeo, as they say. Since 2008, the AJA has digitized well over 500,000 documents and hours of audiovisual material. Each digital site we have built has been funded through outside donors, and we literally could not do them without their support. I want to give a special shout out to two of those donors who I know are joining us online today, Ms. Jean Power-Soman and Ms. Adele Silver. Jean has been a tried and true friend of the AJA since Dr. Marcus's time, and she has been one of our biggest fans, always encouraging us to keep digitizing and making history more accessible and available. Because of her devoted philanthropy, we are honored to host the Colonel Marcus M. Spiegel collection to honor the memory of her great-great-grandfather, Colonel Spiegel, a German Jewish immigrant who became one of the highest-ranking Jewish officers in the Union Army. And we continue to do more with her thoughtful guidance. Her support means the world to us, and thank you, Jean. Adele Silver has been an absolute champion in helping us fund the project of digitizing the archives of her late husband, Rabbi Daniel Jeremy Silver, and her late father-in-law, Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver. We have more to announce in the coming months about these remarkable men and their collections, but in the meantime, I want to acknowledge Adele, who is in our virtual audience, and thank her for her commitment to the archives over the years. Like Jean and Adele, Elisa Frankel and Rabbi Judy Schindler have been outstanding partners in raising funds to digitize important documents from our archives. It is a true testament to the love and respect that people have for their father, Rabbi Alexander Schindler, that they were able to put the funds together in such record time for this digital site. I want to publicly say thank you to both of them and to all the donors in this project, some of whom are in the audience today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are in your debt, and you have all become lifelong friends of the archives. More than a friend of the archives, Dr. Gary Zola has steered the AJA ship for a quarter of a century. I've had the privilege of working with him for many of those 25 years, and I can say that when he retired in 2023, I, as did many others, felt rather unmoored. Having him back here in this space, if only for a brief time, makes me feel settled and content. So thank you. A Talmid Muvchak, an outstanding student of Dr. Marcus's, Dr. Zola received his PhD in American Jewish history from the College Institute, as well as his rabbinic ordination. He's an accomplished scholar who has written dozens of articles and authored and edited numerous volumes in American Jewish history. Under his leadership, the AJA was transformed from a research center to a public-facing institution of international repute. He really expanded the vision of his teacher in ways that Dr. Marcus would never have imagined. On a national level, Dr. Zola played a leading role in the year-long observance of 350 years of Jewish life in America and served on the Academic Advisory Council of the United States Congress's Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission. He was also appointed by President Barack Obama to serve as a member of the U.S. Commission for the Preservation of America's Heritage Abroad, an independent agency of the federal government. And in 2023, he was appointed by President Biden, the then President Joe Biden, as a member of the United States Holocaust Memorial Council. Dr. Zola, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think Dr. Herman was exaggerating when she said she's feeling settled in my presence. Good afternoon to one and all, and I do want to add my own very warm word of welcome to those just spoken by my colleague, Dr. Herman. And of course, warm greetings to all of you who are here in the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati's International Classroom, as well as all of you who are with us online. I want to echo Dr. Herman's very warm greetings to Jean Soman and Adele Silver, dear friends who've done so much for the American Jewish Archives. Wonderful to know you're with us. And we're very pleased to have today members of the Schindler family in our midst. I'll say a bit more about Rabbi and soon to be Rabbi Dr. Jewry Schindler in just a moment. Now this afternoon, friends, we'll be learning more about the life and the career of Rabbi Alexander Moshe Schindler, one of the most influential American Jewish leaders of the late 20th century. My first personal real-life encounter with Rabbi Schindler took place in Los Angeles, California, during the 94th Annual Convention of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. It was during this convention of the CCAR that the historic resolution titled "The Status of Children of Mixed Marriages" was adopted. This resolution, often referred to by the shortened title Patrilineal Descent, constituted, as many know, a revolutionary shift in Jewish identity recognition within American Judaism because it asserted that children born to Jewish fathers and non-Jewish mothers were Jewish, even if they themselves were, especially if they themselves were raised as Jews and considered themselves to be Jewish. Now, in 1983, I had been an ordained rabbi for the glorious period of 9 months. And Rabbi Schindler, in that year, had already become a nationally recognized Jewish leader, having ascended to the presidency of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations a decade before. and his reputation became international in 1976 when he began a two-year term as chair of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, the first Reform Jewish leader to be elected to that position. Now, as a rabbinic neophyte, I sat miles away from Rabbi Schindler. We did not even speak. But I took note of his charisma, his intellect, and his distinctive, compelling rhetoric, which fulfilled my expectations of him, this prominent leader of the religious movement to which I belonged and to which I remain deeply committed. Having already initiated the outreach program of the Reform movement in 1978, Rabbi Schindler deeply favored the adoption of the patrilineal descent resolution. However, many rabbis at that conference spoke out in opposition to the proposal, which did constitute quite a radical break from halachic tradition. Yet, in the face of this eloquent dissidence, Rabbi Schindler challenged our colleagues to align themselves and to speak with prose that is aligned with our practice, to have the courage of our convictions. And after he concluded, there was loud, thunderous applause. And of course, the rest is history. By the conclusion of that convention, this red-headed rabbinic tenderfoot viewed Alexander Schindler as a Reform Jewish titan. In contrast to those for whom familiarity breeds contempt, Rabbi Schindler never lost his worthiness to me as a Jewish leader. In fact, as our contact increased over the years, my respect for him intensified. Ironically, our professional contact deepened considerably after his retirement from his post at the UAHC in 1996, just a year before I became the executive director of this institution. The history of American Jewry appealed to Rabbi Schindler. He had written his rabbinic thesis on a historical topic, and like most who earned their rabbinical title here in Cincinnati, Ohio, Rabbi Schindler revered Dr. Marcus. Dr. Marcus and Rabbi Schindler, your grandfather, his father, had a personal relationship, and letters in this archive document that warm relationship between Dr. Marcus and Eliezer Schindler, Rabbi Schindler's father. And I want both Jean and Adele in our online audience to know that part of the funding of this beautiful structure has came to us because of Rabbi Schindler, who saw what we were trying to do here in Cincinnati. He saw the important role that the AJA played, and because he believed in the commitment the school had to the important role that American Jewish history once played in rabbinical curriculum. Now, this afternoon's program, as you heard from Dr. Herman, is occurring because our teacher, Dr. Michael Meyer, who is widely acknowledged as one of the most distinguished Jewish historians of our era, just completed this wonderful biography on Rabbi Schindler's life and career. And I'm happy that I was able to get it autographed by the author. The book, as you heard, is titled Above All, We Are Jews, a biography of Rabbi Alexander Schindler. And that book demonstrates empirically what struck me back in 1983. And that is that Rabbi Schindler was unquestionably a prominent and notable star in the constellation of 20th century Jewish luminaries. Now, in a minute, I'm going to have the privilege of introducing our speaker, a man who collaborated with Rabbi Schindler over the years, but especially and particularly during the halcyon days of 1976 through 1978, when Rabbi Schindler was the chair, as I said, of the Conference of Presidents of American Jewish Organizations. And so, as you know, it's really a great honor to have Ambassador Stuart Eisenstadt with us virtually to reflect on some of those encounters over the years and hopefully to respond a little bit later in the program to some of the questions that we may have in this audience, and maybe even a little dialogue between Rabbi Schindler and yours truly. But before I properly introduce the ambassador, I want to welcome to the podium Rabbi Jewry Schindler. And Rabbi Jewry Schindler is, as I said earlier, about to become Rabbi Dr. Jewry Schindler. She was for many, many years the senior rabbi at Temple Bethel of Charlotte, North Carolina. And after she became emeritus, she began to devote herself to an academic career. And she has been teaching full-time since. And like any good rabbi, she has decided to advance her career in what we would call in the words of the ancient sages, Torah Lishma. She was going to learn for the sake of learning, and eventually decided she wanted to pursue an advanced degree. And it's been a privilege, Jewry, for me to be working together with you all these years. I will tell you, Rabbi Dr. Saracen has read her thesis too. It is an excellent, excellent thesis, and we're looking forward to celebrating with you. I'd like to invite Rabbi Alexander Schindler's daughter, Rabbi Jewry Schindler, to come forward and say a few words by way of introduction.
Vador, Vador. From generation to generation, the American Jewish Archives is that thread that weaves the generations together, enabling us to learn from those who came before us. Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola has been a faithful shepherd and leader, inspiring students across the globe, including myself. In 1989, Dr. Zola advised me when I entered rabbinical school, and again in 2018, he advised me when I entered the DHL program. I would not be here without him. He literally brought this building to life, sustaining the AJA for more than 25 years. Now, the Talmud teaches that when we quote someone who has died, their words whisper from the grave. My mother, my 4 siblings, and all our spouses, and the 12 grandchildren who descend from my father and supported this project are supremely grateful to the AJA, with Dana, Herman, and Lisa Frankel at the center. You see, prior to this past March, our father's words could only be accessed by coming to Cincinnati. Now his words are available to all from anywhere at any time. Our father spent the near 50 years of his career as a rabbinical student, then rabbi, then Jewish leader, then world leader, laboring over his words. He liked to say that he spent 3 hours on every minute of speech. Now his words in their original can be read with the touch of a keyboard. So I ask everyone here, whether you're in here in person or online, to visit the AJA website, to click into his archives. It's easier on the computer, and to just read some of his sermons and eulogies and letters and be inspired. As everyone said before me, we are so grateful, my family, to all the donors who supported this project. And a shout out to my sister Elisa, whose passion and skill fueled the fundraising. And lastly, to Dr. Michael Meyer and the CCR Press. For 5 years, Dr. Meyer labored over our father's biography, bringing it to life. Michael, what a phenomenal job you have done illustrating the depth and breadth of our father's life work. We are so grateful that you and your wife, Rabbi Margie Meyer, are here. L'dor vador, from generation to generation, our father's greatest influence was his father. My grandfather was a poet who lifted the Eastern European world of old through his words that were put to songs. Songs that gave solace and hope in the shtetls, in concentration camps, and even here in America. And my greatest influence, and that of my siblings, was our father. My father taught me the art of homiletics, that every word matters. And on those rare occasions when I'd be given the highest of compliments and told that I inherited my father's sermon writing skills, he and I would both take offense, because homiletics is not an inherited skill. We labored long and hard to craft our words. L'dor vador, from generation to generation, my father practiced what he preached, living in our home the values he shared with the world. So I'll share with you just 4 of those values he lived in our home. Israel. Our father traveled there all the time, many times each year. And he sent each of us, his 5 kids, to Israel. The 3 youngest, Josh, who's here, John, and I, were sent to live on Kibbutz Kfar Blum with Michael Meyer's daughter. We lived for our 10th grade entire year there. My dad had the closest of friendships with Menachem Begin. While politically they were worlds apart, on a soul level, they were kindred spirits bound by their love of Israel. Our dad taught us that Israel is our home away from home, and Israelis are literally our family. Our father lived the value of building our home and family as an open tent. As you know, outreach was one of our father's greatest visions and successes. From a single speech in 1978, encouraging our movement to reach out with open arms to the intermarried among us and those who had no religious faith, an extensive outreach program was created that touched hundreds of thousands of lives. In 1986, when my sister Debbie married her husband Bob, who is not Jewish, my father welcomed his new son-in-law with the warmest of embraces. My mother used to explain to Bob that he was almost perfect. He was a 9.5, and of course, if he were Jewish, he would be a 10. But in my father's eyes, Bob was already a 10. Just as he encouraged us to do as a movement, my father did in our home. He showered Bob with warmth and inspired him by modeling for him a love of Jewish living. And in 1999, when my brother-in-law decided to convert, my father felt overwhelmingly blessed not only to officiate at Bob's conversion, but to officiate at Bob and my sister Debbie's Jewish wedding. My parents have 12 grandchildren living rich Jewish lives. 10 of them represent the fruits of his labors of outreach. My father taught us by word and deed the value of tikkun olam, of repairing our world. Our Shabbat conversations made it clear that the world needed healing, and our father would be tireless in laboring to pick up the shattered shards. My twin brother and I remember visiting the home of Kivi Kaplan, the Jewish president of the NAACP, for the last 9 years of his life and the first 9 years of ours. We learned that the African American Jewish Alliance matters. Our respective communities desperately need one another. I remember my father's stories of teaching Abby Hoffman, that radical activist who was my dad's confirmand. As kids, we were proud of our dad protesting the Vietnam War, fighting for Soviet Jewry, the White House, the Religious Action Center, Al Vorspan, David Saperstein, Senator Ted Kennedy were all people and places that were part of our daily conversation. Our dad was forgiving. He believed in the goodness of people, that they can change. Though once, when an assistant rabbi was sent to pick up my dad at the airport, the assistant rabbi sheepishly commented that he had gotten a good deal on a German-made Mercedes that he was driving. My father explained that he had not yet forgiven the Babylonians. The many messages from Jonathan Pollard on our home answering machine, appealing to my dad's support with a pardon, taught us that my dad helped people on a global level and on a local level as well. Our father was not just an Ohev Yisrael, a lover of Israel. He was a lover of all human beings. He fought for LGBT rights before it was popular. He fought for women's rights long before it was even a thought in my mind to go to rabbinical school. He'd say, "God bless you," to the person working in the toll booth whenever we passed through. At the 33rd anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, my dad shared a Yiddish expression: "The world is aflame, not just our villages. As Jews, we need to care and we need to act." And lastly, from generation to generation, my father lived the value of Klal Yisrael. We are one as a Jewish people. Our dad's family was religiously diverse. He had Orthodox relatives, and we'd all have holidays accommodating each other's practices. We've learned over the past 601 days since the October 7th massacre, we've learned the lesson of our oneness as a Jewish people. We've learned that pain, that trauma, that anti-Semitism, that Jewish peoplehood and Jewish pride know no denominational borders. Michael chose well the title for the biography from one of my dad's favorite expressions: "What we are, but we are Jews." Our dad was not a saint. His mind was often hyper-focused on work, which meant he gave less attention to daily matters. My brother Josh, who's here tonight, once went to hear my father speak at Washington Hebrew congregation. After the talk, my brother got in the receiving line to see my dad. And when he got to the front, my father reached out to shake my brother's hand and said, "Nice to meet you." To which my brother retorted, "I should hope so. I'm your son." And lastly, Lador Vador, from generation to generation. My library consists of my grandfather's sacred books, my father's sacred books, and my sacred books. We all have matching book plates from the words of a slogan by the Oilim movement developed by my grandfather's close colleague, Nathan Birnbaum. Has 3 words on it: Da'at, Rachamim, and Tiferet, which means knowledge, compassion, and divine splendor. My father taught us through word and deed that we should build our lives on those 3 elements. We should continually seek da'at, Jewish knowledge and worldly knowledge. We should continue to live with rachamim, compassion for all Jews and all human beings. And we should ever appreciate tiferet, the awe and majesty of our worlds. As our liturgy enjoins us, Lador Vador, from generation to generation, we shall praise God's name. God's praise was always on my dad's lips, not so much in the weight of Jewish daily ritual, but in the relationships he built. Tomorrow, I will receive my doctorate in Hebrew letters from Rabbi Dr. Gary Zola. He'll put a hood on me. He taught me that history doesn't repeat itself. History echoes. So I hope that through this program, I hope that through the archives, you will hear the echoes of my father's words, and that they will inform your responses, the struggles that we face today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schindler. Stuart Eisenstadt is an American diplomat, attorney, and author who is known for his significant contributions in law, international relations, and especially to Holocaust restitution efforts. He currently serves as the chair of the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, a post he has held since 2022. It has been my very high privilege, my exceptionally good fortune, to be currently serving on that council under Ambassador Eisenstadt's outstanding leadership. Over the past 5 decades, friends, Ambassador Eisenstadt has served in a multiplicity of U.S. administrations and in a host of prominent governmental posts, including Chief Domestic Policy Advisor to President Jimmy Carter, U.S. Ambassador to the European Union under President Bill Clinton, and under that same administration, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury and Undersecretary of State for Economic Affairs. From the late 1990s until the early 21st century, the United States State Department appointed Ambassador Eisenstadt to serve as the U.S. Special Envoy for Property Restitution. And it was during that time in his career that he secured literally billions in compensation for survivors, and he negotiated important international agreements that facilitated the return of looted property to rightful owners. And it was in this capacity that Ambassador Eisenstadt came to know and to rely upon the American Jewish Archives and its remarkable holdings. His personal research here in Cincinnati contributed to his exemplary efforts in the work of property restitution of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. So before I relinquish, which is not so easy for me to do, before I relinquish the microphone to Ambassador Eisenstadt, let me also point out that Ambassador is an accomplished author. He has written a very significant number of exceptionally important books, including the following important titles: Imperfect Justice, Looted Assets, Slave Labor, and the Unfinished Business of World War II. Second, The Future of the Jews, How Global Forces Are Impacting the Jewish People, Israel, and its relationship to the United States. In 2018, he published President Carter, The White House Years, and just last year, he published a very timely volume titled The Art of Diplomacy: How American Negotiators Reached Historic Agreements That Changed the World. And if you'd like to get a copy of that last book, as you're ordering Dr. Meyer's book, you can easily do that on Amazon. Again, the big title is The Art of Diplomacy: How American Negotiators Reached Historic Agreements That Have Changed the World. Ambassador Eisenstadt, it's so good to see you virtually. Your work has left a lasting impression on global justice, on international diplomacy, and on the policy of this nation. Like so many Americans, we are all in your debt for a lifetime of service to our nation and also to the Jewish people. Ladies and gentlemen, won't you please join me in welcoming Ambassador Stuart Eisenstadt back home to the American Jewish Archives.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you for serving with us on the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council. I want to also thank Dr. Dana Herman for inviting me to honor Rabbi Schindler. I want to mention specifically also his daughter, who just gave such a beautiful commentary, Dr. Jewry Schindler, and Adele Silver, who is a dear, dear lifelong friend and whose brother Phil Zeidman and I are very special friends as well. It's really an honor to praise a remarkable man whose influence shaped the trajectory of Reform Judaism and the early history of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, who led the fight against the pernicious Zionism as racism resolution in the United Nations, and who had an influence on the peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. And he is also a man who was the moral courage of an entire generation, Rabbi Alex M. Schindler. And it's a special privilege to do so with his family present and to launch Professor Michael Myers' excellent new book. Alex was born in 1925 in Munich at a time when the world was teetering on the edge of darkness. His Jewish family, like so many others, saw the dangers early, and in 1935, when he was just 9 years old, they fled Nazi Germany and sought refuge in the United States. That journey from oppression to freedom left an indelible mark on Alex's soul. As a young man, he joined the U.S. Army and served during World War II as an intelligence officer. But even after the war ended, he never stopped fighting, not with weapons, but with words and faith and vision. He received his rabbinic ordination from the Hebrew Union College, the Jewish Institute of Religion, and soon became a leading voice in the Reform Jewish movement. In 1973, he became president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, a position he held for over 2 decades. He was more than an administrator. He was a prophet with a practical streak, someone who could see the world as it is, but who envisioned what it could become, and then helped build the bridge to get there. One of the most pivotal moments in Rabbi Schindler's career, and indeed in modern Jewish history, came in 1978. In a speech that sent ripples through the Jewish world, he called on Reform Judaism to welcome interfaith families with open arms. He believed that rather than turning away from those who had married outside the Jewish faith, we should invite them in, support them, and help nurture Jewish life within their homes. This, at the time, was truly radical. Many in the broader Jewish community viewed intermarriage as a threat to continuity. But Rabbi Schindler saw something else, an opportunity to actually widen the circle of belonging. He said, "We must not judge our people for the choices they have made, but instead help them find meaning in those choices. We must open the tent," he said, "to all who would dwell within." That single phrase, "open the tent wide," became the rallying cry of a new era in Reform Judaism. It signaled a turning point in how the movement would approach inclusivity, not only with intermarried families, but with Jews of color, LGBTQ individuals, the unaffiliated, and those returning to Judaism after years away. One story captures the impact Rabbi Schindler had. It comes from a congregation in the Midwest. A non-Jewish woman who had been attending services for years with her Jewish husband sat quietly in the back, never asking for attention, but always showing up. One day, after years of quiet participation, she approached the rabbi in tears and said, "No one ever told me I belong, but last week you read a statement from Rabbi Schindler about opening the tent, and for the first time, I felt like the tent had a place for me." Rabbi Schindler not only led a movement, he also changed lives. Beyond the walls of the synagogue, Rabbi Schindler was a relentless advocate for justice. He marched for civil rights along with Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a powerful ally of the feminist movement, calling for full gender equality in Jewish ritual and leadership. He was among the first Jewish leaders to speak out in support of gay and lesbian Jews, long before it was politically convenient or socially safe to do so. And his heart was always with the oppressed, because he had gone through that in his early years in Germany. During the Cold War, Rabbi Schindler was a fierce champion of Soviet Jewry. He lobbied tirelessly, organized demonstrations, and pressured world leaders to allow Jews in the Soviet Union to emigrate freely. His activism contributed to the opening of the Iron Curtain for thousands of Jewish families seeking freedom and dignity. Alex Schindler's legacy has never left us. His influence is felt in every synagogue that welcomes newcomers without judgment, in every rabbi who dares to speak uncomfortable truths, and in every Jewish community that opens its doors a little wider. He understood that tradition and progress are not enemies, that to honor the past, we must also care deeply about the future, and that religion at its best is not about walls, it's about bridges. He once said, "The Torah begins with an act of creation and ends with a burial. The space between this is life. What we do with that space, that's the question God asks of each of us." Alex Schindler filled that space with courage, with compassion, and with commitment. In particular, I want to discuss his biblical service as chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations from 1976 to 1978, when our two lives intersected. He became the first leader of the Reform movement to chair the conference, as Jewry mentioned, and he brought to the table a vision that extended beyond politics or partisanship. He brought a deep belief in Klal Yisrael, the unity of the Jewish people, and a passionate commitment to ensuring that every voice had a place in our national dialogue. When his term as chairman ended, the Central Conference of American Rabbis passed a resolution praising his, quote, dauntless courage and great wisdom, end quote. These words ring just as true today. In remembering Rabbi Schindler, we are reminded that leadership is not about comfort. It's about conviction, courage, and compassion. As we gather today to reflect on his life and leadership, we do so not only to honor his towering presence within American Judaism, but also to better understand the courage it took to speak what he considered truth to power. One of the most consequential relationships Rabbi Schindler navigated was with President Jimmy Carter, also a man of deep faith, a moral voice on the global stage, and a president whose vision for Middle East peace intersected, yes, and at times collided, with the concerns of the Jewish community and with those of Rabbi Schindler. Their relationship was marked by earnest dialogue, principled disagreement, frankly, tension as well, but a shared belief in the moral possibilities of diplomacy bring peace to Israel. My personal interactions with him were friendly but intense during his tenure as chairman of the Conference of Presidents, as I was President Carter's chief White House domestic advisor, but also his official private back channel to the Israeli embassy during the Middle East peace process between Egypt and Israel, and perhaps his most prominent Jewish advisor. When I assumed my position on January 20th, 1977, Rabbi Schindler was among the very first to congratulate me, and I wrote him a thank you note and said, "I hope that I will live up to your expectations in serving the country for the better of the American people." We had innumerable meetings, telephone calls, and correspondence on 3 topics. One was on the infamous UN Resolution 3379, passed by the UN General Assembly on November 10th, 1975, equating Zionism and racism. A chairman of the Conference of Presidents, Alex sent me a letter, which I still have, of September 17, 1977, enclosing a letter of the same date that I should give to President Carter. He told me in the cover note that it would be a great idea for every point of view, while wishing me a happy Rosh Hashanah. The letter to the president expressed, and I quote, Alex's, quote, admiration for your championship of human rights as a vital aspect of U.S. foreign policy. He continued, we have no doubt that your renewed commitment to restoring the image of America and is important in the eyes of the American people. In that regard, he asked President Carter to use his forthcoming appearance before the United Nations to call upon the UN to expunge this infamous Zionism racism resolution, which had done so much to contaminate the moral authority of the UN. He urged vigorous leadership by the US in his letter in an effort to eliminate this noxious resolution. And it would be a significant advance, he told the president, for the cause of human rights and a significant advance for the freedom of nations within the UN for a united attack on racism and apartheid. That this would reassure the Jewish community and Israel itself, but would help to rescue the UN from what he called its own prejudice and folly. He closed with an emotional wish. May God strengthen you, he said to President Carter, in your pursuit of the precious values of peace and human dignity. President Carter followed Rabbi Schindler's advice and strongly denounced the resolution, stating, as the president put it, the, quote, unwarranted linking of Zionism with racism was an impediment to serious consideration of human rights matters, end quote. And he said that the U.S. would resist the resolution by all possible means. A second area of our interaction during the Carter administration was regarding my recommendation, along with White House counsel Robert Lipsey, to President Carter on April 30, 1978, to create a presidential commission on the Holocaust chaired by Elie Wiesel. On May 1, the president announced the commission at a White House reception in honor of Israel's 30th anniversary, with Prime Minister Begin present and with Alex prominently attending. But his involvement went beyond that. On June 21, 1978, he wrote to the president applauding the initiative and stating, this is indeed a fitting action on the part of a man and a government committed to freedom and justice for all people. But he made the important recommendation to the president that he appoint to the commission Benjamin Mead, a fighter in the Warsaw Ghetto and founder of the Warsaw Fighters and Ghetto Resistance Organization. When the president named 24 members to this prestigious commission on November the 8th, 1978, Benjamin Mead was indeed among those selected, and he proved to be an indispensable founding father and early leader of the museum, serving on its governing council for 24 years. The third and most contentious relationship was over President Carter's Middle East Peace Initiative. President Carter was determined to bring peace to Israel, both to enhance American influence in the Middle East in our competition during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, but also out of religious conviction to safeguard the Jewish state. But his call for secure Israel came alongside a similar call only 2 months into his presidency for a quote-unquote Palestinian homeland. And this occurred while Prime Minister Rabin was still in the U.S. following a state visit with President Carter in the White House, one I attended. Combined with President Carter's early swing through the Arab world and his belief that they were ready to negotiate with Israel, it stirred concern in Israel and in the organized Jewish community. And this is where Alex came in to work. He had a very difficult and important task, frankly, further complicated by the Israeli elections in 1977, which proved to be a watershed in Israeli politics. After 30 years of continuous liberal labor government, Menachem Begin, leader of the conservative Likud party, whose family had perished in the Holocaust, after 8 unsuccessful tries, became prime minister. It was the first time a prime minister came from the revisionist wing of the Zionist movement, a disciple of Zev Jabotinsky, who believed in the greater Israel from the Mediterranean to the Jordan. His election represented a profound demographic and political shift in the Israeli election, which has increased over the decades to this very day. After meeting twice with newly elected Prime Minister Begin, Alex stressed to him the need for him to form a government quickly, but in his words, to make it broadly representative so most American Jews could support him. Rabbi Schindler's initial task was, in fact, to create a bridge between Begin and the generally more liberal American Jewish community. As Martin Meyer describes in his excellent book, Rabbi Schindler was a strong advocate for Israel while maintaining the right of diaspora Jews to voice independent opinions on Israeli politics. These were not easy years in the mid-1970s. The American Jewish community was navigating complex and at times divisive debates about Israel's direction, particularly following Prime Minister Begin's election. Rabbi Schindler, known, of course, for his progressive ideals, might seem to be at odds with Prime Minister Begin's more conservative vision. And yet, and this is the true mark of leadership, he was able to bridge those differences. He chose dialogue and cultivated a personal friendship of trust and confidence with Begin, even as he stood firm in his own convictions. But he did so always with respect, dignity, and with the goal of Jewish unity. His leadership during that time helped prevent rifts from becoming chasms, differences from becoming divisions. He understood that the strength of the Jewish people lay in our shared destiny, that we must stand together, even when we do not always see eye to eye. Begin listened to Alex's sage advice and in fact included non-Likud reassuring figures in his new cabinet, like Moshe Dayan as foreign minister and Asa Weitzman as defense minister. Alex promised Begin that, and I quote, "There won't be an erosion of American Jewish support for Israel," end quote. And yet he said ominously, and I quote, "The American Jewish community is now bothered about Jimmy Carter." I warned Carter that Begin's ascendancy would complicate his Middle East peace initiative. As Begin called the West Bank by its biblical names, Judea and Samaria, and saw them as, quote, liberated, not occupied territory, end quote. Many in the mainstream American press, like Time magazine, felt Begin was an extremist. I did not. And in fact, shortly after his election, Begin began quietly pursuing better relations with Israel's Arab neighbors, especially Egypt. But he did prove to be a very tough negotiating partner with a deeply held philosophy, a legalistic posture, and a habit of lecturing. Begin was an enigma to the president and his foreign policy advisor, who didn't fully appreciate that he had embodied a history of oppression in his own life and a revisionist philosophy. Begin rejected the Land for Peace formula initially in UN Resolution 242, following the 1967 Six-Day War, which had been a staple of American Middle East diplomacy under Republican and Democratic presidents. Begin accelerated the construction of settlements on the West Bank, seeing it as part of historic Israel. Alex's other challenge as chairman of the Conference of Presidents was to champion Israel's cause to the Carter administration and manage the Jewish community's relationship with President Carter, who envisioned a very different future from Begin for the West Bank. Given the president's determination to forge a peace agreement between Israel and its Arab neighbors, this inevitably meant pressing both sides for painful compromises. There was a confrontation with the American Jewish leadership, and Rabbi Schindler was at its epicenter. While President Carter was engaging Arab leaders in pursuit of peace, I held my first of what would become numerous meetings with Rabbi Schindler. Silver-haired, sharp-tongued, and passionate. He represented this conference of presidents chairman more than 40 diverse voices in American Jewish life. And in our early conversations, he suggested that the president convene monthly meetings between Jewish leadership and Carter's top diplomatic and national security and officials. It was an ambitious request, but a sincere one. Though the meetings happened only periodically, I believe had they occurred more regularly, as he suggested, some of the political fallout from the administration's bold pursuit of Middle East peace might have been tempered. Alex's commitment was always clear: to ensure that American policy protected the interests and security of the State of Israel, while upholding the Jewish people's moral responsibility to pursue peace and justice. Tensions grew, however, as President Carter's public criticism of Israeli settlement activity began to mount. There have been many White House meetings with Jewish leaders, but I doubt if any were as intense, substantive, and full of compliment of senior U.S. government officials as the one I attended in the cabinet room of the White House on July 6, 1977. Around the large oval-shaped cabinet table were some 40 presidents of major Jewish organizations, many having to sit in the back because there was not enough room. And it was all led by the eloquent Alex Schindler. The meeting was scheduled for unusually long, 2 hours for a White House meeting. The principal fear of the Jewish representatives was that the U.S. would impose a plan on Israel that would force it back to its 1967 borders and create a separate state on the West Bank for the Palestinians. Vice President Mondale and Secretary of State Vance, before the president came in, assured Alex and his colleagues that the Carter administration was dedicated to Israel's security and would not compromise it in any way in a peace agreement. But the Jewish leaders were frankly unmoved, accusing the administration of asking more of Israel than of the Arabs. And they didn't believe the Arabs wanted peace. Alex complained that while Israel was being publicly pushed, the Arabs were not being asked to commit to make peace with Israel. Despite assurances by Mondale and then by National Security Advisor Zbig Brzezinski, Alex and his colleagues complained that Israel had little room for negotiation. Halfway into the meeting, President Carter entered and everybody rose. He thanked them for coming and reiterated that his principal guidance was the following: the peace and security of Israel, and these are my own notes from that meeting, real peace accepted by Israel and her Arab neighbors, full diplomatic relations, open borders, free travel and tourism. There was a collective sigh of relief when he promised to greet Begin as a friend on his first visit as prime minister, and that he hoped, he said, quote, to strengthen Israel's esteem. He said, no one in his administration has ever drawn a map for Israel's final borders and would not impose a solution. Yet, in words no other president has used before, he described the problems of the Palestinians as, I quote, a cancer that needs to be healed. They need a home and a redress of wrongs, end quote. At this point, an amazing thing happened, which only Rabbi Schindler could have done under these tense circumstances. He blessed the president with the traditional Hebrew prayer for the heads of state, to which President Carter said, Amen. I didn't say Amen. Beginning on a positive note, Alex then said that the president, and I quote, these are Alex's own words as I took them down at that meeting, was the vessel of 2,000 years of Jewish history. We come here with open hearts and grateful hearts. He recalled it as a candidate. Carter had met with him and his colleagues and made promises, and he said, you have fulfilled them much more than anyone could have expected. You brought self-respect for our nation after Watergate, healing, morality as a factor of government, and human rights and international relations. Alex then joked to laughter from everyone, including the president. If that's the case, why are we all here if we're so happy? He answered his own question. He said, your words are not perceived as you intended them to be. The world is not used to your open diplomacy, and your words are interpreted to be a blueprint to be imposed. We're nervous. This leads to a toughening of the Israeli backbone, end quote. He then read out a statement by Arab leaders indicating that they expected the U.S. to impose a settlement on the Israelis. Others read out Carter's statements on Israel returning to its 67 borders, and still others pressed for Israel's co-production on fighter jets, guidance systems, and other arms with Israel. As we approach the end of the allotted 2 hours, the president summarized his own beliefs, speaking candidly and earnestly. Quote, the Arabs gain the world opinion when they can emphasize points that further their cause. And Jews in Israel seldom stress that the United States favors a full peace for Israel. For the first time, a full peace. Alex, speaking for the group, insisted that, quote, Begin has been very forthcoming, end quote, and concluded by reporting that based upon his meetings with Begin, the Israeli prime minister felt that, quote, others need to be more flexible if we're going to move forward, end quote. The Middle East profoundly changed on November the 9th, 1977, when Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, who, by the way, Alex specifically praised on the Yom Kippur after Sadat was assassinated, and for whom Carter developed a special fondness, made his historic and courageous trip to Israel, the first Arab leader to do so, pledging no more wars. But in a series of negotiations which took months between that initial visit that occurred between Israel and Egypt, they were unable to create an actual concrete framework for peace. No more wars is not the basis for a peace agreement. Taking a remarkable gamble, and I can assure you, over the objection of virtually all of his senior advisors, who felt it was too risky and likely to fail, President Carter decided that only he could break this impasse, and he invited Sadat and Begin to Camp David to try to break it. Over 13 crucial and difficult days and nights between September 5 and 17, 1978, and with over 20 draft agreements that he personally wrote and shuttled between the Egyptian and Israeli cabins at the presidential retreat, the historic Camp David Accords were signed. But it's also almost always forgotten that these accords were only a framework for peace, not a binding legal treaty. And under the terms of the Camp David Accords, those were to occur within 3 months. Well, 3 months went by, 4 months, 5 months, and now almost 6 months later, without Israel and Egypt able to agree to an actual treaty language. Jewish organizations nervously watched the impasse and contended that President Carter was no longer even-handed, as he had been at Camp David, and had become an advocate for the Egyptian position, a criticism with which, by the way, I disagree then and now. In one memorable 1978 dinner with Jewish leaders at the White House, President Carter's frank words on Israeli policy left Rabbi Schindler deeply concerned. He feared that the president's approach might shift public opinion away from Israel, recalling with unease the indifference shown by President Roosevelt during the Holocaust. To Alex, this was not just a political disagreement, it was an existential issue. Ted Mann, who had just succeeded Rabbi Schindler as chairman of the Conference of Presidents, charged, and I quote, President Carter seems to be trying to compel the Israelis to accept a watered-down version of peace, end quote. As the New York Times reported, in their words, and I'm quoting out of the New York Times, perhaps the bitterest broadside of Mr. Carter came yesterday from Rabbi Alexander M. Schindler, president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, who charged that, quote, the time has come for a reversal of a dangerous and failed policy of the Carter administration, to buy off the Saudis with our weapons and to submit to Egypt's ever harsher conditions for peace with Israel. He said that policy is not a prescription for peace, it's an invitation to more war. The other article further noted that, quote, Rabbi Schindler, who often consults with the administration concerning Middle East matters and with other Jewish leaders, were puzzled over Mr. Carter's failure to criticize the Egyptians over what they interpreted as the Cairo regime's continual altering of the terms of the original Camp David Accords. They are especially bewildered, the Times article said, that the leaders of the Jewish community, including Rabbi Schindler, asked why the administration was so forceful in its criticism of Israel's latest rejection of the altered peace proposals relayed by the Egyptians through Secretary of State Vance. The criticism of Alex and his colleagues had an impact. Secretary of State Vance reached out to initiate a major effort to mollify Jewish groups and the Jewish community, as had happened during previous breakdowns of the peace process, where they had bitterly charged Mr. Carter with being insensitive to the Israeli position. More broadly, it led to an improved peace treaty that President Begin was able to sign, although not before another bold step by President Carter in his search for peace. Over the remarkably strong objection, and I can assure you it was remarkably strong and uniform, of all his advisors, myself included, he decided to go to Israel and to conclude a shuttle diplomacy to see if he could seal this first agreement between Israel and its hostile Arab neighbors. In this case, Egypt, the strongest militarily, with whom Israel had fought 4 wars since 1948. Between March 8th and March 14th, 1979, President Carter shuttled between the two countries, even meeting with a full Israeli cabinet. And the presidential suite at the Camp David Hotel on March 14th, the last Sunday before his return to Washington. In fact, Air Force One was already refueled. And if I may tell you, it's a humorous story in the midst of such a difficult negotiation. Air Force One had been refueled. We went close to an agreement, but not there. And President Carter had taken down his suit and put on his flying outfits. All the aides were going down from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. The airspace had been cleared for Air Force One, and suddenly Begin calls and says, I'd like to see the president one last time, which we assumed was simply to say, thanks for coming, I'm sorry it didn't work. Well, the president, not prepared for this meeting, suddenly said, look, I've got to now get dressed again with a suit and tie because Begin is very formal, and said to his aides, a few of us left, please entertain the prime minister while I get ready. And Begin said, as we waited in the lobby of King David Hotel, you know, young men, this is a famous hotel. Yes, sir, we know that. Not for the reasons you think. I blew this hotel up when the British were here. I assure you I won't do it while the president is still here. He went up to the presidential suite. They sealed the agreement at that time. And then as they came down for the waiting press to announce this to the world, a quite remarkable thing happened, which is that the elevator stalled between the first floor and the lobby. And Secret Service agents had to pull Reagan and Carter out butt first, and I call it the breech birth of the treaty. But Alex Schindler, deeply rooted in his experience as a child refugee from Germany, remained cautious. His life had taught him not to underestimate the fragility of Jewish security. He believed deeply in Israel's right to defend itself and feared any policy which might compromise it. He had an impact. I'm convinced that the treaty is a better treaty because of his words. He was taken seriously and his voice carried weight. The relationship, complicated and often difficult, reflects the intricate dance of Jewish leadership in American life, balancing loyalty to our own country with devotion to Israel. And Alex did this better than anybody could have. He respected presidential power, but he also respected the fact that it had to be used in ways that bettered the national security of the United States and the security of Israel. Alex Schindler did this in ways almost no one else has been able to do. He never hesitated to praise when it was deserved, nor to protest when conscience demanded. He was above all a man of conviction, willing to engage, to challenge, to demand better from those in authority. And this, perhaps, he and President Carter were not so different. Both were driven by moral purpose, faith, and a vision of peace. They didn't always agree, but they believed in the transformative power of dialogue, especially when things got rough. So let us honor Rabbi Schindler not only for the harmony he pursued, but for the courage he showed in moments of discord. Let us remember that leadership is about accountability to truth and justice. May we honor his memory not only with words, but with our own actions today. May we, like him, be willing to listen and to lead. He certainly had an influence on my life, especially at this time of rising anti-Semitism and Holocaust distortion, denial, and ignorance. It's especially important that we follow Alex's example and continue to speak with clarity, to lead with principle, but to never shirk from the responsibility history places upon us. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, thank you so very much. I hope you'll be willing to stay with us a few more minutes. Believe it or not, it's already 5:45. Let's take 15 or 20 minutes, and maybe we can have an exchange of some questions. I don't know if we have any questions from online, but I'm going to give you all a few minutes to see if you do have any questions, and I'm going to ask the first question. Perhaps that will stimulate or give people an opportunity to think of questions of their own. So, Ambassador, I want to pick up where you left off. I have sort of a two-part question. First of all, I know that Rabbi Schindler was very involved in the claims conference, especially after he retired from his post at the Union. And I know that this topic, we all know this topic has been first and foremost in your very illustrious career. Did you have any opportunity to work with Rabbi Schindler on the whole issue of restitution and in the claims conference, and give you an opportunity, in a sense, to speak about this topic, which is, I know you know is as close to your heart as anything?
Yes, he was a great advocate for the claims conference, who I've represented as a pro bono negotiator since 2009, because he realized that the Holocaust was not, Gary, only the genocide of 6 million Jews and 1.5 million children, as catastrophic as that was. It was also the greatest theft in history, the theft of personal possessions, of pianos and musical instruments and art and furniture, of businesses and homes. And this was done with the same, he realized, the same systematic effort as the genocide itself was. And that getting restitution was tremendously important, especially to survivors. So since 2009, and certainly with Rabbi Schindler's inspiration, our negotiating team has negotiated $9 billion in recoveries for Holocaust survivors with the government of Germany. I'm going in July of this year, just a month and a half, for our next round of negotiations. Our budget for 2025 that we've negotiated includes $1.5 billion, and at least half of that is for home care for poor elderly survivors, to keep them in place, because in large parts of former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, there are either no old age homes or you wouldn't put your worst enemy in one. So keeping, and even in the United States, keeping survivors in their homes is important. And the home care workers provide everything from food assistance to medical assistance to socialization to driving survivors to doctors. We've improved pensions. We've had increases in payments for those who are in kinder transport. All of these things are things that Rabbi Schindler believed very, very strongly in. And his inspiration can certainly be felt.
Thank you. I'm okay. I see there are a few questions. So now, Dr. Meyer, I'm going to remind you all, you need to press the button in front of you and hold it, just press it and hold it while you speak so that the ambassador can hear you. This is Dr. Meyer.
Ambassador
on your
Osdek,
book.
first of all, thank you for giving me so much information for the second edition of my book.
Well, maybe we'll co-author it.
But I wanted to ask you this. Despite all of their profound differences politically, as is well known, Begin and Schindler established this deep relationship that lasted well beyond the time that Schindler was head of the President's Conference. In fact, Schindler, when Begin died, gave a very flowery eulogy for Begin in front of the President's Conference. When Carter was running for office, Schindler was a big supporter for him, actually campaigned for Carter, and had very high hopes that this person, with whom he had much more in common at that point than he had with Begin in terms of issues, nonetheless never established this kind of a close relationship that he established with Begin. You pointed out some of the differences that there were between them with regard to Israeli policy and the like. I wonder if you could say something about personal relationships between the two. Were they really different kinds of individuals? Was there something there that kept them from becoming closer that had nothing to do with policy matters? And were there any contacts between Carter and Schindler after Carter's term of office?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, let's look at the different positions that a president, and particularly President Carter, but any president has, and Alex's role as the president of the Conference of Presidents. It was Alex's job to represent a very diverse Conference of Presidents and to be a steadfast defender of the state of Israel before the U.S. government. A president of the United States has to look at all the factors. He has to be able, if he's going to make peace in the Middle East, he has to be able to deal with the Arab countries as well as with Israel. He's got to be able to do with the Jewish community, with Congress, with all the conflicting interests. And this in and of itself always will create a chasm between somebody who's representing the Jewish community and Israel on the one hand, and the President of the United States on the other. Number two, they were very different personalities. Alex is very gregarious, great speaker, very voluble, and President Carter is more reserved. So their personalities were not that close. I do not think that they had any contact after the administration, and frankly, their relationship was quite tense and quite difficult. President Carter felt that neither Alex nor many of the other Jewish leaders had any sense of how hard he was trying to get a peace with Egypt as the most powerful Arab army, the most dangerous to Israel's security, and how much he was having to push Sadat. For goodness sakes, Sadat, when he went to Israel on his first trip, lost his foreign minister at Camp David itself. During the negotiations, his foreign minister resigned. He didn't go public because he didn't want to wreck he literally resigned and refused to participate in any negotiations because he thought that Carter was pushing Sadat too hard for compromises that Sadat couldn't make. So it's inevitable when you have such different opinions between the Egyptians and the Israelis that the president's got to be able to push both. And if you're not willing to do so, and you just say, well, whatever Israel wants, they can have from the United States, you're never going to have peace. And you won't have it today, by the way.
Other questions? Dr. Septimus, what you have to do is press that button and keep it down, not the light, but where it says press, and hold it down. There you go.
I take directions well from you.
Good, good.
This is sort of a loaded question. You sort of alluded to it. I wish Rabbi Schindler was alive today. What do you think he would say to Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu in this time of crisis today?
Well, I think Mr. Meyer may be in a better position to know that than me, but I would think that if it was difficult to make a rapprochement with Begin, which he did, making one with the current government in Israel might test even Alex's capacities for building bridges. But if anyone could do it, he could. I would hope that he would be able to modulate somewhat their policies, but I mean, no one outside of Israel can expect to do that alone. So I think he would find it extremely difficult to be president of the Conference of Presidents right now with what's going on with Gaza. And let's remember one thing. With respect to President Trump, in just the last 4 weeks, President Trump, great friend of Bibi Netanyahu, has done the following. He announced in the Oval Office with the Prime Minister, to his shock, that he was going to start negotiating directly with Iran, and as opposed Bibi's interest in bombing Iran's nuclear facility. He's negotiated directly with the Houthis so that they don't bomb U.S. ships in the Red Sea, but not Israel's. He negotiated directly with Hamas, to get one American hostage out, but not Israeli hostages. And with respect to Gaza, you can now see a change in tone given the humanitarian situation. So I think that when an American president and an Israeli prime minister have different opinions, as they did with Carter and Begin, it's extremely difficult. Again, if anybody could bridge that gap, it would be Alex, but I think that we're seeing a very different Israeli government than Begin had. But Begin, remember, again, had Dayan in the cabinet. He had Weizmann in the cabinet. He himself, while he had a very strong ideology, was also a person who knew when to compromise. I think we have a very different situation in the Israeli government today.
Are there any other questions? Ambassador, before we conclude, I know that everyone cares so deeply about the United States Holocaust Museum and Memorial and your important work there. Do you want to say anything about its particularly important role today in light of the
Yes, thank you,
concluding
Jerry.
comment?
I really appreciate that. So at a time, as I mentioned at the conclusion of my speech, when we have rising anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, distortion, and ignorance, and of course this is inflamed by the social media. The museum has done something very important. We have a $10 million grant from Congress under the Never Again Holocaust Education Act, and here's what we're doing. Number one, we have a survey showing that 13 to 17-year-olds in the United States give virtually all of their information on social media, unvetted information. But that's where they get it. So we are now going on social media with the museum. When there are distortions put on, we go immediately and have a historian document what is incorrect about it. So second, we know that young people get not only a lot of their information on the social media, they get it through visual means. And so we have now cut over 20 videos of Holocaust survivors, many of whom are volunteers at the museum. Only 30 to 60 seconds, because we know that the attention span of young people is very limited. And in those short videos, we have the survivors talking about what it was like when they were teenagers. And we have a picture alongside the video of what they look like as teenagers. So we try to relate to the young kids. Next, we will have in June our 50 millionth visitor. 93% are non-Jewish. But you can only have so many people coming to Washington. So we now have a program called Beyond Our Walls. And we have contracted with the American Library Association to put up our exhibitions in 100 cities, the libraries of 100 cities, which have very small Jewish communities. And we then work with the superintendents of education to bring their school kids to see those exhibitions. These are places, again, with very little of a Jewish population and kids who have no knowledge of the Holocaust and may not be able to come to Washington. So there's one last thing, and that is starting in 2027, we're going to engage in the most ambitious revision of our permanent exhibition to bring it into the 21st century in the following ways. Number one, if you go to the museum now, and it's an incredible museum, you see what happened to the Jews, but don't have an explanation as to why. Why was it that doctors, lawyers, academics, judges all violated their oath of office? And we want to explain that and what led to the rise of Nazi Germany. What conditions were there that led a cultured democratic country to go down the abyss? We want a better explanation. There's now none of who Hitler was, who Goebbels was. The guy had a PhD, so people can understand that. Next, we want to integrate the American experience in the Holocaust in a better way. We have a brilliant exhibit which takes you back into the 1930s with the racism and anti-Semitism and isolationism of the 30s. Next, we want to do a better job of bringing front and center the rescuers. There is a section now in the museum, but it's really buried, so that people understand when they first come in that there were choices that can be made. And some people, far too few, but there were some people who did well. People don't realize, for example, France, 75% of the Jews in France survived 4 years of occupation. So in all of these ways, and in many others, we want to try, of course, through new technology, to bring the museum into the 21st century and to ask the questions and see what happens when democracy breaks down, when the rule of law breaks down. And I think that will speak to the future as well as the past. So we're, again, not asking only what happened, but why did it happen? And how did it happen? And one last thing, and that is we want to integrate the war and the Holocaust in a better way. We found in doing surveys that a substantial percentage of the visitors believe that only a few of Hitler's henchmen got together and killed 6 million German Jews, not realizing the collaboration which occurred beyond Germany and how many Jews outside of Germany, of course, most in Poland, were killed. So in all of those ways, we hope to redo the permanent exhibition and make it a great 21st century museum as it has been a great 20th century museum.
Well, Ambassador, I'll just say that, well, I always anticipated that my time on the council would be an honor and exciting. It just so happens that the period in which we live has made it absolutely unbelievably stimulating, and I value the opportunity to work together with you. I know that our group here and the group online is very grateful to you, Ambassador. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for sharing with us so beautifully today.
Well, thank you for letting me share my memories of a great man.
Now, to conclude, I'm going to invite Rabbi Dr. Schindler to come up, and I think that it would be important to let Rabbi Schindler himself speak for himself. In our holdings, in addition to all of the documentary evidence that you heard about, Ron, you're getting ready with the excerpt. We have Rabbi Schindler's very last speech. It just so you know, he passed away from a heart attack in November of 2000, and the week before his passing, he spoke at Baltimore Hebrew congregation. And ironically, the year he decided he wanted, maybe not so ironically, it was important to him, he was speaking on the future of American Jewry and America. And I want you to listen to this quote from Rabbi Schindler, because Dr. Meyer concludes his book with a paragraph quoting Rabbi Schindler that I'm going to read, and I believe you'll hear in the text that Rabbi Schindler speaks the very same spirit with which Dr. Meyer decides he wants to end the book. Dr. Myers points out that Rabbi Schindler, were he alive today, he would likely be very happy with the inclusivity of our movement. And then Dr. Meyer wonders what Rabbi Schindler might say about all the problems that we face, not only in our movement, but in America writ large. And then Dr. Meyer quotes Rabbi Schindler saying this: "When I was a little boy, my father took my sister and me to Warsaw, where we visited the shtibel of the Umaner Hasidim, the devotees of Reb Nachman, the Bratslaver Rebbe. It was a shtibel like all other shtibels, with one remarkable exception. Carved into the wood of the synagogue's ark was not the usual inscription, Da lifnei mi ata omed, know before whom you stand, but rather inscribed therein was a Yiddish phrase, a sentence in the vernacular. Yidden, seid sich nicht mischayish, Jews, do not despair." So it's this positive outlook. I want you to let Rabbi Schindler conclude our study of him, and then Rabbi Dr. Schindler will end our time together. Go ahead there, Ron, please.
I recall my attendance in recent years at one of the annual Holocaust commemorations held yearly under the dome of the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. The speaker at that particular occasion was Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who proudly identified himself to the assemblage as an American and as a Jew. Present were all the other justices, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course, scores of senators, representatives, members of the cabinet, men and women of every faith. And as American soldiers paraded past us, bearing the flags of those regiments that had liberated extermination camps, I could not help but remember how powerless, utterly helpless we Jews were but 50 years ago, and to feel awestruck by how we have moved as a community from the fringes to the very center of the world's power. Now, best of all, we have done so without abandoning our Judaism, our Jewish values, our Jewish commitment to community. Justice Brandeis famously proclaimed that the 20th century ideals of America have been the ideals of Jews for 20 centuries. We have ennobled this land even as this land has ennobled us. Jewish citizenship has helped to create an America not only of entitlement and privilege, but also of blessing and of responsibility. And in turn, America, this golden Medina, this land of gold, has provided a safe haven for a new golden age of Judaism.
Dr. Zola, Ambassador Eisenstadt, and Dr. Herman, thank you for honoring our father's memory so beautifully on this 25th yurt site since his death. We stand in a room full and Zoom full of connections, those who played tennis with our dad, or hosted our dad, or heard our dad, who worked beside our dad, as Ambassador Eisenstadt did, working for restitution after the Holocaust, or with President Carter in the pursuit of peace. We stand in a center, a seminary, a center of learning, and we learn that holiness starts with sacred study and ends out in the world. My father lived on this campus for 5 years and was ordained here in 1953. HUC, this space grounded him. And we stand in the American Jewish Archives, in these hallowed halls made holy by the words it holds. Except during World War II, our father fought not with weapons, but with words, challenging the US to work for a stronger peace agreement for Israel. May we all know when to protest and when to praise. May all of us use our words to fight for the marginalized, the oppressed, for Israel, for peace, and for all. Amen. Amen. Thank you for coming.